Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Harpreet Gill and welcome back to my channel, Money Talks. Today's topic is a really important topic that I really need all of us to start understanding, and it's around debt. Debt is one of those things that I always say is another form of modern day slavery. We're no longer shackled by chains, but we are shackled by tremendous amount of debt. And it's unfortunate that the school system does not do its job to teach us about this crucial life skill that we need to know about. But it's so important that we start dissecting it sooner than later, because it's unfortunate that we go to school and we get sold this dream that having student loan debt is one of the best form of debts that you can have. But in fact, a lot of us are graduating with no return on our investment. And then we just continue going on in life with this cycle of piling on more and more responsibilities. And a lot of the times we're using credit cards and loans to take care of a lot of those responsibilities and not letting us really get into financial freedom. Financial freedom starts with us unshackling ourselves from the burdens of debt. Today I have a very special guest who's going to help me dissect this topic. His name is Zach Broll. I've worked with him very closely over the last 2 years. I refer a lot of clients to Zach because he has helped many of my clients understand where they're at when it comes to their current debt situation and has helped them tackle their personal debt situation so that way they can focus on other areas of their finance, whether it's building up their emergency funds, protecting themselves through insurance, or even starting to get investing in areas where we can at least grow our money to outpace inflation and reduce taxes as much as possible. But before we get to any of those other areas, we really need to help ourselves reduce the amount of debt that we have so we can understand the rules of the debt game. Welcome to the Money Talks Decoding Finance YouTube channel, where it's all about destigmatizing the conversation around money and building wealth. Allow me to bring you Money Talks every Sundays. Oh my goodness, Zach, thank you so much for coming onto my show today. I'm so excited to have you, and I'm so excited to talk about this topic on debt that so many Canadians suffer. But before we get into it, I want us to kind of know a little bit more about you. Who is Zach?
That's a question that could be answered over a long period of time. Very simply put, Zach's 43 years old, married. I have a son, he's 8 years old. I've been in the debt business, or getting people out of debt business, for almost 9 years now. If you're wondering about my education, I have an MBA and I have a degree in music as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how did you go from music to the debt business?
Very slowly. I was in the automotive franchising business for a while. What that has to do with music is absolutely nothing either. I realized early on I wasn't going to get anywhere with music,
right.
Especially as my hair was falling out. But no, I won't go into the details of how I got from one to the other necessarily, but just I saw something with a skill set that made sense to me. It seemed to match what I was doing in my previous work. And here I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I completely understand the transition from a completely irrelevant area to something completely different.
Story of my life. Yeah.
That's me too. Mm-hmm. I was a social worker before I decided to get into financial planning, and it was an interesting transition as well. But so much relevant skills that I was able to pull from that industry into this one now. But the topic that I'm going to talk about today, I really wanted to have you as a guest because I remember the first time I met you when I brought one of my clients to help with their restructuring of their debt. And the way you broke things down, it just resonated with me, and I found you hilarious. And so I figured you're the perfect person to have on my channel to kind of dive deeper into this.
Great.
So how would you describe the Canadian credit system?
A disaster. That's how I would. That's the short version. The longer version is if you look at the system itself. What people think of when they think of the credit system. You're looking at two players predominantly if we're talking about individuals, and that's Equifax and TransUnion.
Okay.
Or as I call them, Coke or Pepsi, or as I have other pet names for them, but you probably want to keep this PG-13, so I won't do it. Ultimately, these are the bureaus. These are the people that amalgamate the information on your credit history. So if you get a credit card, you get a loan, you're dealing with one of the major lenders, the banks or other major lending institutions, not necessarily banks, but they still lend. They're going to report to Equifax and or TransUnion, and Equifax and TransUnion will amalgamate this information. They will produce their reports, and they're going to provide your credit rating and your credit score. The rating has to do with your payment frequency, how well you pay, how often you pay, whether you've missed payments or not. And the score is ultimately the interpretation of that. And for better or for worse, that score has a huge impact on people's lives. And I say for better or for worse because it was originally intended just as a means to let lenders know whether so-and-so that they were dealing with would be a reasonable risk, whether this person pays and whether they pay on time. It's blown up into this catastrophic, I had a client who applied for a job where his job was to monitor gas pumps and they wanted to do a credit check.
Wow.
Well, what on earth does your credit have to do with whether you can monitor a gas pump?
Absolutely.
Unless they think you're going to be checking your credit card bill periodically while you're watching the pump. I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it's turned into this monster, so that's why I have some choice words for it. But that's kind of basics of it.
Yeah, no, for sure, and especially in a society where we're not educated about this stuff, right? I always say that if we had known better during like high school times, as we come out of high school into adulthood, we have a better understanding of how debt works, whether we use it as consumer debt or really just leverage to be able to build our wealth. But a lot of times, before we even understand it, we already shoot ourselves in the foot. And
then reload, it's they get people early on, for sure. And, a lot of young people don't realize the credit card they get. It's not free money.
Right.
They're also stunned by the fact that they can actually, for the first time in their life, finance something.
Right.
So you may only have a $500 car, but the idea is you can buy something for $500 and wait, I don't have to pay $500 right away.
Right.
Awesome. No, not awesome. Terrible.
Absolutely.
But think back to when you were 18. What do you know? What do I know now? I mean, it's
exactly. And for myself, I hated the idea of having to owe money to somebody, but I ended up shooting myself in the foot by lending up my name to other people, thinking that I was just being a good friend. And
you see that a lot.
Yeah.
You can always tell when the person has about 4 different phone companies they owe money to. You would think, they're just hopping from company. No, it's because they're co-signing for friends and this and that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see it a lot.
Absolutely. And I remember my credit score was stuck in the 300-400s for years because at the time I was like, I didn't use these phones, so I'm not paying this debt. But you realize really quickly once those collectors keep on calling your phone down. And it was really the moment that I realized I needed to fix my credit score was when I wanted to book a vacation and all I had was my student visa at $500 limit. And it's very hard to find a vacation for $500 overseas, right?
Here, so you go to downtown Washington for that.
Exactly. And that's when I started to realize, because I kept asking friends, can I borrow your credit card? Now I was in the other person's shoe, asking other people to borrow their credit cards, but at least I gave them money up front. And then I realized, I'm like, okay, you know what, Harpreet, if you can't even get a loan to get a vacation, what's going to happen to you when you need to buy a house or if you decide to start a business and you need a loan?
Yeah.
And that's when I had that moment of realization and realized.
At least you had it.
Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of people don't.
Exactly.
Until it's much later.
And I know you mentioned the 2 big players, Equifax and TransUnion. What would you say to people who rely on other sources like Credit Karma or Borrowell?
Oh, well, those guys are ultimately, so I want to use the correct terminology, they are interpretations of those bureaus. So Credit Karma, TransUnion, Borrowell, Equifax. I like them for the most part in that they're convenient, and if you need a quick and dirty way to access your score and your basic information,
right.
It's useful. I mean, it's free, so it's worth every penny you pay them.
Right.
You're going to get hit with a lot of advertisements. They're going to constantly be telling you, you can improve your. So you're okay with those. The challenge, of course, is. At some point, if you really need the correct information, you should go directly to the source, just because you'll get a more comprehensive report.
Right.
Borrowell isn't bad. Credit Karma is horrendous. And what I mean is, if if someone does a proposal, for example, it'll say bankruptcy,
right.
and you'll say, well, it's not a bankruptcy, and the the response we seem to get from Credit Karma is, well, look, it's a free service. What do you want?
Right.
So, and now try to change it. It's wrong, but that's what you're dealing with. But again, if someone, we use it quite a bit because occasionally someone will walk into my office and they'll say, well, look, I have this, and this. It's about 15,000, but I know there's another 10,000 I owe.
Right.
Well, who do you owe it to? I have no idea. It's been
Right.
years. So we go on, okay, let's go on credit. It's easy to sign up. Let's see what's there. It's not the word of God. It's not going to tell you precisely what's out there necessarily, but it's as close as you're going to get.
Right.
So I have no problem with those guys. And again, they're simply interpretations of what's already there.
Yeah. So for somebody who's looking to get like an actual understanding of where they're at, what the outstanding debts they have, you really want to go to Equifax or TransUnion to get the most precise data.
Yeah, if you're renting a place or you're looking for a mortgage, they're just going to check anyways. But let's say you want to rent a place and the landlord says, I'd like your Equifax report. You can go to Borrowell.
Right.
I think you're better off just going to, 5700 Yonge Street, or 5650, it's the same building. You go to the basement, give them 2 pieces of ID, and you can actually get your free report, though that won't give you the score. You will have to pay them for the score.
Right.
If you want the information, you can actually get it for free.
Okay.
The thing is, the free report's actually wonderful. There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
If you're not used to it, though, it's kind of like reading Romanian for the first, you kind of look at it and go, what, you sit on the toilet long enough, it'll make sense. But it's true, actually. But if you want to give someone, a lot of people, the truth is most people don't know what they're reading when they
Right.
and that includes landlords who I think are perpetually clueless when it comes to this. I'm just hitting everyone today. But they'll look at, they want to see the score. For most people, they want to see the score. If the score is good, fine. If it isn't good, they might dig down a little further.
Right.
But ultimately, yeah, going to the source is never a bad idea. But again, just for your own, I'm subscribed to both of those guys just so I can take a peek every now and then.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some of the factors that make up your credit score?
Sure. So there's really 5, if we're talking high-level view.
Right.
So the first is payment history.
Okay.
Now, that's actually worth the most. That's 35% of your score, but payment history, you'll notice I didn't say payment in full history. Payment history simply means do you pay and do you pay on time. Now, when they say do you pay, if we're talking a credit card, a line of credit, do you pay at least your minimum payment?
Right.
Now, that in and of itself is already a problem because, as you know, minimum payment just keeps the creditors off your back.
Right.
But your debt just does that. It doesn't really move. And it might actually go up a little.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all they're measuring.
Right.
That's 35% of your score. 15% of your score is how long have you been paying the bill on this particular credit instrument. So if you get a credit card today, you use it, you get the bill, you pay once, congratulations, you paid,
Right.
but that's 1 month.
Right.
It's not the same as if you had that card for 2 years, 3 years, and you've been paying every single month. But right off the bat, you'll notice 35, and this other one is 15, the length of history, 35, 15, 50% of your score is, do you pay your bill on time? 50%.
Right.
Another 10% is what's often referred to as credit type.
Right.
I call it diversity of credit, which is, do you have 1 credit card? Do you have 6 credit cards? Or do you have a credit card, a loan, a line of credit, maybe a second credit card? The score encompasses the thought behind it is, can you manage different types of credit? A credit card is revolving credit.
Yeah.
Whereas a loan is what's known as installment credit.
Right.
Different way of handling things. Your car payment, you pay every month the same amount on the same date.
Yeah.
Credit card you may or may not use. You might use a lot, might use a little. That's 10% of your score.
Yes.
Another 10% of your score is new credit. Did you apply? Were you approved? Were you rejected? How often did you apply?
Right.
10%. So you total those guys up, you're up to 70%.
Right.
The last 30% is, very disturbingly, balances.
Mm-hmm.
So only, and by balances I mean, what do you owe? Now I say disturbing because only 30% of your score is based on what you owe, which means you can owe the moon and still have a good credit score. And we see it all the time. People walk into my office all the time. They'll say, yeah, I owe $74,000, but look at my credit score. It's amazing.
Right.
And I'll say, yeah, no kidding. Look, you're paying the bill every month. You've been doing it for God knows how long. You have all kinds of credit. You're always seeking credit. The only thing hurting someone is their balances are very slowly creeping up.
Right.
But even then, just a balance in and of itself won't hurt your score. You got to get up around 30% before they start putting negative pressure on you.
Right.
And sure enough, what happens when you get right about there? Oh, sir, we've approved you for another $4,000.
Exactly.
It's brilliant.
Right.
And so what do people do? They look at their score and they go, oh my God, my score's so good. So they just keep paying. And I think it's evil.
Absolutely.
I really do. Yeah.
Honestly, I teach about credit myself in my webinars, and I always tell people that the minimum payment is literally a death trap, because you can have a credit balance that you're using at 30%, but if you still have tremendous amount of debt and you're making minimum payments, a lot of us don't even realize that if we have large amounts of debt and we're paying the minimum payments, in fine prints, they'll say on your statement that it'll take you 50 odd years to pay off your debt.
If you're lucky, I've seen over 200.
Oh, wow.
You know, you look at people sometimes and you say, how long do you plan to live? You know, and it's pretty nasty. But I don't want to make it, it's probably too late. I don't want to make it sound that the score is worthless. There is a time and place for it. Where I have a challenge is when people invest everything they can into the score.
Right.
And you try to tell them the score is not giving you the full story of your financial health.
Absolutely.
All that score is doing is saying, yes, so-and-so is really good at making at least minimum payments on time. Not enough.
Right.
And certainly not a recipe for long-term happiness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always tell people that that's just one factor of multiple that you need to focus on, because if you're planning to buy a home, for instance, they're not just looking at your score, they're looking at the details of your debt to income ratio and other factors as well that make up the ability for you to actually get that mortgage. Just don't get excited about having a 750 credit score when you have $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of debt, but only are bringing home about $40,000 in income, which I see often, and I'm sure you probably see those scenarios as well.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, as I think you've heard me say this in the past, and anyone who knows me has heard it, so they're probably sick of it by now, but I've always said to people, think of your credit score as your hair, not mine, obviously, you know, yours, but it's always ironic coming out of my mouth, but the reality is it is like hair. I always say think of cash as your finger. You know, you can wake up tomorrow, if you look like me, you're not going to be very happy. You'll get over it, but you'll look in the mirror and you'll say, okay, it's going to grow back, and it will. And a guy like me can show you how to get it back. Cash, you wake up and you're missing this finger, you're devastated. It's not coming back, I assure you. You can do everything you want. You can try to slam it in there. It's not going to work.
Right.
And what you see are people who are cutting off a finger every single month, but their hair is beautiful.
Yes.
Take it from me, hair is overrated. You know, and it's very unfortunate. People will throw gobs of money at their credit just to maintain the score, because it's not always their fault. They've been told by people, you know, if you want a house, you need your score to be here. I can get you a loan. There's always someone who will give you a loan. The question is, do you want it?
Right.
Meanwhile, you know, you've cut off all the fingers. You're up to the wrist. Next month will be the elbow. You know, it's just slowly killing you.
Exactly. It's the interest rates. Like anybody can really go get a loan, because, like you said, people are willing to give you the debt. But it's a matter of how much does that cost, right? The interest rates. I hear so often, you know, when people go to third-party lenders, where the interest rates for mortgages, when I first heard that you can get a mortgage at 15-20%, I was like, what? That's absolutely crazy. When you have a mortgage of 3%, you're barely paying off the principal. Imagine when you have an interest rate anywhere up towards that. Yeah,
well, that particular loan, most likely, it's something I've seen more in the last 2 years. Usually what you've just described there is a second mortgage for the down payment. So you have someone, let's say, who wants to purchase a house for $500,000, but they need to come up with you know, the 25 grand, the 5% down, which is already a problem, but that's a whole other topic. But they don't have it, so they will borrow the 25 against the house, and you know, you corner someone on that, and you say, not malevolently, you say to them, why did you do that?
Right.
And they'll always give you the same answer. Well, I want to own a house, and you have to very, you know, politely tell them you don't own a house. You own 2 mortgages. Right. And one of which is interest only, and of course the person who gave you the loan is beautiful, because in the GTA, for at least the last couple of decades, you know, for the most part, the price has been going up. That could change at any moment. There are a number of second mortgage lenders who are in trouble right now.
Yeah.
But people will do extraordinary things to get what they want.
Yeah.
One being a really good credit score so they can get the ultimate goal, which is the house.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So, as an expert in this area of credit and debt, are there any insider tips that you can share with the general public on how to build their credit score? Because I do talk about the traditional ways of making sure that you're not using more than 30%, making sure that you're making your payments every month, not applying for credit on an ongoing basis when you don't need it, things of that factor. But outside of those, are there any insider tips that we can learn from?
There is one insider tip.
Okay.
Okay, and the insider tip is there are no insider tips. There is no magic bullet. I hate to disappoint people. There is no magic bullet. Not that I'm aware of. There is no, hey, just do this, this, and this, and your score. There's only one thing you can do that really makes a score jump, but it's not so much it's not a trick or anything like that. It's correcting an error on the report.
Right.
So I'll give you a real life example. I met a lady years ago. This is like 2014. She wasn't even a client of mine. I hadn't taken her through the restructuring process. She had done a proposal years ago. She had paid it off about 2.5 years earlier. And I had helped a friend of hers with her debt. Excuse me. I had helped her. So she said, why don't you just go see this guy? He might be able to help you out. And looking at her report, I could see for whatever reason, and this happens a lot with bureaus, her bureau was still showing her as in the proposal, even though she had paid it off 2.5 years earlier.
Right.
And so I said, this is a mistake. So I filled out the correction forms for her, got her to sign everything, and I said, look, take this, fax it to here, because she had to get some other papers. Long story short, within about 6 weeks or so, her score just flew up because not only is she out of the proposal,
right,
but everything had to go retroactive, had to adjust retroactively.
Right.
So there you have a nice 100-something point difference. But that wasn't a trick. That was just, hey, Equifax, you've got this all wrong.
Right.
This is a mistake. I would say to anyone, be very leery of anyone who says, I can make your score go up like that. No, you can't, because again, 50% of your score is payment history.
Yeah.
You can't fake that. Every year, at least once, every year, I will get a call from someone, and it's always the same thing. They'll say, I was told I need 12 months of payment history in order to to get a car, whatever it is.
Right.
And I'll say, okay, that's fine. And they'll say, how do I do that? And I'll say, well, it's very simple. You pay the bill for 12 months. And they'll say, no, what I mean is, how do I do that in 3 months? And I'll say, do you own a time machine? There's no way to do it.
Right.
12 months is 12 months.
Right.
So if 50% of your score is paying the bill,
right,
unless someone can hack in and change your...
Right.
I suppose if there's someone who can do that, God bless him, it's not me. I don't recommend it, but I mean, maybe he's really good at what he does. But the insider tip is I've yet to discover an insider tip.
Well, I appreciate the honesty, because that's the thing, right? A lot of times we think that we can take these loopholes around certain systems, and there's some cases there is none.
Yeah. I should also point out, just in case anyone has any buddies in the U.S., the U.S. system is different.
Right.
It's more debtor driven, so there are some, I wouldn't call it a trick, but there's actually some very clever things you can do to help yourself. But in Canada, it's more creditor driven.
Right.
So ultimately, the options, I won't elaborate, but the options you have in the States aren't really available to you here.
Right.
And I have seen people get caught up in that because they'll have a buddy in the States who say, well, here's what I did. And they'll say, okay, cool, and it doesn't work.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, because I've had scenarios where people have asked me certain questions. They're like, I've seen an advertisement of X, Y, and Z.
I'm sure they have. Yeah.
And then I've always referred back to you just to make sure, double check that information. Yeah. And it's really important to understand that the system in the United States versus Canada is very different when it comes to debt or even wealth building. And so it's very important for us to keep those factors in mind. Mm-hmm. So I know you kind of touched on this already, but just to kind of further elaborate, is it better to have multiple different loans, or is it okay to just have one and kind of build from there?
I mean, that's a question that there's an answer there that could go on forever. If we're strictly looking in terms of credit,
right,
I think the best way to answer that is one is rarely enough.
Right.
One is rarely enough. But at the same time, you don't need 6 credit cards, 7 loans, a line of credit. If you talk to most mortgage brokers, they'll tell you, hey, look, I want to see 1 revolving account, a credit card, 1 installment account, a loan, a car loan, or any regular loan. And I want the total to be at least $2,500 of credit. That's what they want to see. Now that's very broad, because it depends where the person's starting, what's their past look like, did they have trouble before, have they had the same pieces of credit for umpteen years, we don't know.
Right.
But what I do try to, when we're trying to help people rebuild after a proposal or in some cases a bankruptcy, our goal is we try to beef it up a little more. We're looking 3 trade lines, totaling about $3,500 of credit.
Okay.
But there is I won't go into detail here, but there is a right and wrong way to do that.
Okay.
I can certainly tell you running out and trying to get every piece of credit under the sun is a recipe for disaster, because A, you'll be turned down, or B, if you're not turned down, you kind of get flagged you get flagged as a credit seeker. And that hurts you too. And unfortunately, we do see that with our clients, despite my best attempts. It happens a few times a year. I'll have someone and they'll file and they'll say, okay, look, we're going to rebuild. I want you to wait until this. We get together and I'll put a plan together for you. And sure enough, they walk in like, Zach, I got turned down 3 times. And my first response is, so why did you try the other 2 when you got hit the first time? But they're so eager, so they just they start looking for credit all over the place. And it's just like, stop, you're just hurting yourself.
Yeah.
Conversely, the reason we do the credit rebuilding, not only because it's a good thing, is other people do the exact opposite. They just kind of sit there and they're terrified to do anything credit-wise, and we want, no, you gotta, if you get into an accident and you just sit there, you're never gonna get back. If the doctor says just lie there because if you move you might get hurt.
Right.
Well, gee, thanks. It's kind of the advice we're getting now.
Yeah.
But if you try to bench press a piano right off the bat, well, you're going to die. So you have to start out with the little dumbbells and work your way up.
Absolutely. I agree, and that's pretty much the advice that I give.
I mix my metaphors a lot, sorry.
It's all good. Metaphors are good. Yeah. So I remember when my credit was shot, and my best friend actually worked at a collection agency, and she gave me...
Did she have your file?
Unfortunately not. I wish. But I remember when those collectors were calling me day in, day out, and they harass you, right? Mm-hmm. Rightfully so, I guess. But I remember when she gave me this insider tip, I was head over heels. She's like, did you know, Harpreet, that you can call them and settle your debt for a lower amount because they bought your debt at pennies on a dollar, pretty much, right? And I was like, really? Oh my gosh. And that's kind of how I started my process of rebuilding my credit. But then years later, I had heard that wasn't a wise idea. And I want to clarify that for anybody who might have any education around there.
Again, that's start at the beginning. So settling certainly makes sense if you can. The thing to remember is if you're doing a straight settlement, a cash settlement, what's sometimes called an informal settlement or an informal proposal, you're going to need a lump sum.
Right.
So it doesn't always apply, or it's not always doable or feasible for everyone who has debt, because if you owe $20,000 and let's say you're able to, kung fu fight with the creditor and get it down to 12, that's wonderful.
Right. You
just cut your debt by 40%. At the same time, they're going to want that money right now.
Right.
And if you don't have maybe you have stocks or bonds, maybe you've saved up some money, you refinance a house, or you have a rich Uncle Bob, there's no way to really pay that off.
Right.
So settling certainly makes sense. And just to clarify, some collectors do buy, there's 2 types of collectors. There's buyers of debt,
right, and
then there's just collectors who are collecting on behalf of the original creditor.
Yes. But
they're still beholden to the whims and the wishes of the original creditor.
Right. So
that has an impact on how much they'll settle for as well. Sometimes they'll like your offer, but the original creditor will say, no, that's a no-go.
Got it.
So it's certainly worthwhile doing, if for no other reason than if you're in collections, your credit's already taken a hit. You may as well get a deal. Now you will they'll feed you a line sometimes just saying, hey, if you pay us back in full, it'll look much better. No, they've already done the damage. That's just their way of trying to collect as much as possible. I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But no, you can still settle. So it definitely makes sense. Why not get a deal? Why pay back 10 if you can pay back 8 or pay back 7 or pay back 7.5, whatever it is. So an informal settlement does make sense in those occasions. There's, I don't want to cross shows here, but there's other ways of restructuring which we can get into later. What your friend told you though, the other friend who said, oh, you shouldn't have done that, what I suspect, and now I'm trying to read this person's mind,
right? They
were probably thinking, oh, if you had just done nothing, it would have just fallen off your credit report.
Right.
Not true. And there's a few ways to look at that. So the first thing is people will say, well, I heard that if the debt stays on your report for more than 6 years, it just falls off. No, it's 6 years of inactivity. In other words, if you owe me, and I keep hammering the credit report in Equifax and TransUnion, and I say, look, Harpreet owes me, even if I can't reach you, as long as I report that I am actively engaged in the process of trying to collect, you'll notice there's something that says date of last activity. That keeps refreshing. So the 6 year clock keeps refreshing over and over again.
Got it.
Now, the other thing to keep in mind though is even if something does fall off the report, because it does happen, sometimes the creditors just give up, your debt isn't worth looking at, they forget, they screw up. Even if something does fall off the credit report, it doesn't mean the debt is gone. And what's important to understand here is you want to distinguish between owing and whether the creditor, what the creditor can do to you. The creditor, once you go into arrears, the creditors have 2 years to sue you. Okay, meaning they'll get a judgment, they'll try to garnish you, put a writ on your house, do whatever they can. So once 2 years elapses, they can't sue you anymore, but they can try to mess up your credit. What if they fall off your credit bureau? That's great, but even then, and I've seen this happen, have you ever had the chicken pox?
I did.
You did?
I did. I think I did.
Yeah. Okay, you look fine to me. You don't have it right now. Guess what? That chicken pox virus is still in you. Okay, why am I giving you such a revolting example? Because that's the same way. Okay,
got it.
You may never hear from that virus again. You could live to 99 and die in your sleep, and you'll never hear from the chickenpox virus again. Or it could turn into shingles.
Right.
And you will. That's a lot the same way. Just because it's not on the report doesn't mean you don't owe anymore. It's there on someone's record, and it may rear its ugly head again in several ways. I've had clients where we filed a proposal. We look at their credit report, we put everything that's on there into the proposal, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, 3 weeks later, you hear, hey, TD says you owe $8,000, and I say to my client, do you owe TD? And they'll sit there and they'll go, oh my God, that was 2005. Guess what?
It's still there.
Yeah, TD was obviously, they found out and they said, hey, you still owe us.
Right. It
was there. What also happens less frequently, but it happens, is collectors will call you and they'll trick you. They'll say, hey, we know about this debt. And you'll say, but that's old. They'll say, yeah, you know what? If you just show some goodwill, pay $10 towards this, maybe we can just close the file. You just reactivate it.
Oh wow.
Sometimes I've heard stories. I don't want to name any. I've heard stories of some collectors even paying it themselves to reactivate it. Yeah, I heard that from someone who was in the business for a while. I've never seen it myself, but I do know people. So I suspect what happened there when someone said, "Oh, you shouldn't have paid it," is they figured if you had just laid low, it would have gone away. It might have gone away.
Right.
But not necessarily. I know a guy whose speeding ticket just vanished, and it never heard from it again. Want to try? I don't recommend it.
Exactly. Well, no, thank you so much for all that wonderful information. I know that many people are going to benefit from that. I know that we have you for another episode talking about restructuring debt, so I'm super excited about that.
Great.
But there you go. You have it, folks. We learned so much about debt today, about credit and how it works, especially in Canada. And if you're ever looking for advice, I would really advise that you reach out to me. Contact information will be below in the description, below this video. So please reach out. I do offer one-on-one consultations for free. So if you're looking for advice, I'm looking for you and I'm ready to help you elevate from your personal finances and reach your next goals. So please reach out. Also like and subscribe so you can get your latest and greatest news and information and education around everything finances, because that's what we're here to do. Decode everything finance.